I recognized him before my brain even allowed me to accept it. Not by his face, not by his clothes, not by the dirty beard or the hunched shoulders. I recognized him by the way he walked, that slow, defeated shuffle. The way his feet dragged as if the ground itself was pulling him down. The way his back curved forward, like he was permanently bracing for a blow that never stopped coming. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Because I never imagined I would see the man who had once been my husband like this again. Not in the middle of a street corner. Not bent over a dumpster like a shadow. Not sorting through torn bags and crushed cans just to survive. I had been walking out of the bank with a folder tucked under my arm. A routine morning, a routine errand, a routine life. The kind of ordinary life you build after a person breaks you into pieces and leaves you to glue yourself back together. I was halfway down the sidewalk when I saw him. He was leaning over a large green dumpster behind a row of shops, separating scraps with filthy hands. His movements were automatic, practiced. Like he had done it so many times it no longer embarrassed him. An old sack lay beside him, already half filled with aluminum cans. And then the light hit his profile. My heart stopped. The whole world shrank down to that one corner of the street. There he was, malnourished. Overgrown beard, white hair matted and tangled, clothes stained and hanging loose on a frame that had once been strong. But it was him. It was Thaddeus, the man who used to sit at our dining table, speaking about construction projects with bright eyes and a voice full of passion. The man who wore crisp suits and smelled like soap and coffee. The man who once held me at night and promised me a stable future. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. I couldn't take a single step. My fingers tightened around the folder as if the papers could anchor me to reality. And my mind, cruel as it was, flung memories at me without mercy. The day he left, the way he vanished without a clear explanation, the cold letter, 3 lines of ink that destroyed years of love. Forgive me, it's for the best. Don't try to look for me. That abandonment broke me, not loudly, not in a dramatic explosion. It broke me slowly like a crack spreading through glass. I went from rage to contempt and from contempt to a sadness that never fully went away. And now, after so much time, life was showing him to me like this. Reduced to a can collector. Invisible to everyone passing by. I felt ashamed of my own thoughts. A part of me wanted to cross the street immediately. Pretend I hadn't seen him. Protect my pride. Protect the clean life I had built. Because if I stood there too long, my past would collide with my present. And I didn't know which one would survive, but something stronger than pride pushed me forward. I took one step, then another. My heels clicked against the pavement, and as if he could hear the sound of my life approaching, he raised his head by instinct. Our eyes met. For a second, he didn't recognize me. Then I saw the shock of memory flash across his face like lightning. His lips parted. His hands trembled. He stared at me as if I were a ghost coming to collect an unpayable debt. He tried to move away. Not fast. His body was too weak for that. But he shifted, turning his shoulders, trying to angle his face away. Shame, pure shame. My voice came out as a thread. Is that you? He swallowed hard, looking down. You shouldn't see me like this, he said. His voice was hoarse, dry, like it hadn't been used for anything but silence. Forget it, he added. Go on your way. But I didn't. I stood there in front of him with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I looked at him closely. The torn shoes, the fingers cracked from cold. The sunken eyes that carried exhaustion far deeper than hunger. Nothing about this man resembled the Thaddeus I knew. And yet it was him. Tell me, I demanded, and I hated how my voice shook. Why are you living like this? He pressed his lips together and looked around, as if he feared someone might be listening. The street felt suddenly too open. Too exposed. Then he shook his head slowly, like a man refusing to open a door he had nailed shut long ago. You should never have seen me again, he whispered. I did everything so you wouldn't have to carry this. I stepped closer. I could smell the streets on him. Stale sweat, metal, old food, damp cardboard. With what? I asked. With what did you do all this, Thaddeus? He looked up, and his eyes filled with tears that didn't fall immediately, like his body couldn't even afford to waste water on crying. It was to save you, he said. That sentence split me in two. It didn't make sense. My mind refused it. Save me. From what? I opened my mouth, but the air felt thick. My legs went weak. I reached out and grabbed his arm. Not gently, instinctively, like I was anchoring myself to something real. Save me from what? I whispered, almost begging. He tried to stay upright, but his body didn't respond. His eyes rolled slightly. His knees buckled and then he collapsed. Right there, onto the dirty asphalt, like an old tree that could no longer hold itself up. "Help!" I screamed. People turned. A couple of passers-by hurried closer, startled. Someone called 911. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I cradled his head against my lap. Just like I used to do when we were young and he got sick. I never thought I would hold him like this again. Fragile, defeated, human in a way he never allowed himself to be when we were married. The ambulance arrived fast. Paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. One of them checked his pulse, his eyes, his breathing. Severe dehydration, the paramedic said. Anemia. Signs of chronic malnutrition. The words felt unreal. Chronic malnutrition. That was something you heard about on the news, not something you saw on the face of a man you once loved. They asked if I was family. I hesitated for half a second, then said quietly, I'm his ex-wife. They exchanged a glance but didn't ask questions. I rode in the ambulance with him, my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palm. All I could hear was that sentence repeating in my head. It was to save you. At the hospital, they rushed him into the emergency room. They asked me to wait. I sat in a plastic chair under harsh fluorescent lights, staring at a vending machine like it was the only stable object in the universe. A nurse came out later. "He's stable," she said, "but he's in rough shape." I nodded, barely able to speak. Then she added something that made my stomach drop. "He's been seen around here before, sleeping in makeshift shelters, refusing help, no ID on him, no ID. He had erased himself, on purpose. Hours passed. When they finally moved him to a small room, I went in. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not just physically, like life had shaved away everything that once made him confident. His eyes fluttered open. The second he saw me, his face tightened. "Leave," he said immediately. "My worry doesn't belong to you anymore." I swallowed. "You never stopped belonging to me," I said quietly. "Not as my husband, but as part of my history." He turned his face toward the wall. "I'm not leaving," I continued. "Not until you tell me the truth." His jaw flexed. He looked like a man fighting an invisible war inside his chest. Finally, with a broken voice, he murmured, "I didn't go broke because of bad decisions." I froze. "I went broke," he whispered, "because I obeyed." The words hit like a hammer. "Obey who?" I demanded. He didn't answer. His silence was harder than any confession. That night, I slept sitting in a chair beside his bed. Not because I was comfortable. Not because I felt safe. But because something in me knew, if I left, the truth would disappear again, and I had lived too many years in the dark already. Morning came like a slow bruise. He woke again, eyes heavy. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before speaking. "Everything I lost," he whispered. "I lost so that you would stay alive." I felt my throat close. "And even so," he added, "you hated me." My eyes burned. "I didn't know," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought you betrayed me." A tear slid down his dirty cheek. "That's what I needed you to believe," he murmured. In that instant, I understood something terrifying. My resentment, my entire story of pain, had been built on a lie designed to protect me, and the misery he lived in wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was a hidden sacrifice. I reached for his hand. His fingers were dry and cold. "Rest," I whispered. "This time you are not alone." He closed his eyes, exhausted. And as I watched him under the harsh white hospital light, I realized something else. This reunion among trash and cans hadn't been random. It felt arranged. Like life had placed him in my path at the exact moment I was finally strong enough to face the truth. And the truth, whatever it was, felt big enough to destroy more than one life. That day he slept almost the entire time, drifting in and out, sedated and weak. I stayed. I watched the hallway. I watched nurses. I watched strangers. And the more I watched, the more I felt something wrong. Too many people walked past his door and slowed down. Too many eyes lingered. Not curious eyes. Not concerned eyes, checking eyes. That night, when he woke again, I asked the nurse to give us privacy. The door closed. The room felt small. Quiet. Dangerous. "Tell me everything," I said bluntly. "Don't lie to me anymore. It makes no sense now." He stared at me for a long time. Then he spoke. "The day I disappeared," he whispered. "That same day I was supposed to die." My chest tightened. "What?" I breathed. He swallowed hard. "I was ordered," he said. "Ordered to do something, and when I refused they gave me a choice." "Ooh," I demanded. He flinched at the word like it hurt. "Dangerous people," he whispered. "People with money, with power, with reach." He turned his head slightly and I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, not for him. For me. I was accused of fraud, he continued. A project. A contract. I signed documents, but they were traps. Ghost invoices, diversions. Shell companies. My mind raced. And you tried to report it, I guessed. He nodded slowly. That was my mistake. He closed his eyes for a second, gathering strength. They showed me false evidence, he whispered. Witnesses they bought. Files they created. And then, his voice broke. And then they showed me you. I felt ice crawl up my spine. He nodded. Photos? He said. Off you leaving our building. Your route. Your schedule. Places where you were alone. I covered my mouth. Memories flashed. Those days when I had felt watched. Followed. Those moments I dismissed as paranoia. They told me, he whispered, if I spoke, if I fought, you would pay the price. My entire body trembled. So you ran? I said, my voice thin. I didn't run? He corrected bitterly. I erased myself. He looked at me, eyes wet. I signed, he said. I handed over assets. I let them empty the accounts. I let the fall look real. I left without explanation so you would hate me. I couldn't breathe. All those years. I whispered. The debts, the foreclosure, the ruin. He nodded. It had to look like my punishment, he said. And your collateral. I stared at him, shaking. I cleaned houses, I said. I went hungry. I slept on borrowed sofas. I was humiliated for years. His face twisted with pain. I know, he whispered. That's what kills me. I felt tears spill. And why didn't you ever come back? I asked. He looked away. Because they kept watching, he said. Every time I tried, someone reminded me you were alive only because I was complying. Silence flooded the room. I sat back slowly, feeling like my life had been ripped open and rewritten. For years, I hated him, and now I was hearing that his disappearance had been an act of protection. An act of love twisted into tragedy. I leaned forward again, my voice suddenly hard. I want names, I said. I want the truth. All of it. He shook his head weakly. Not all names are safe to say, he whispered. My life was in danger without me knowing. I snapped. You don't get to protect me with silence anymore. He stared at me, then nodded faintly. There's something, he whispered. Something I never told anyone. He swallowed, then said, before I disappeared, I hid evidence. My heart jolted. Evidence of what? Off everything? He said. Off the embezzlement, the rigged contracts, the whole network. My mouth went dry. Where? He hesitated, as if even saying it would summon danger. In a metal box? He whispered. Buried under the old workshop. I stared at him. And you never used it. He looked at me like I was a child asking why the sky was dark. Because if I did, he said, they would have killed you. A sick cold settled in my stomach. Then his voice dropped lower, almost to nothing. But now they know I've surfaced. He looked at me, eyes full of a resignation that scared me more than fear. And if they know I'm alive, then maybe silence doesn't protect you anymore. I felt something ignite inside me, a force I didn't recognize, a need, a vow. Then we don't stay silent, I whispered. He reached for my hand weakly. Don't dig up the past, he begged. The past kills. Silence kills too, I replied. And I've been dying slowly for years. His eyes filled. You don't know who you're messing with. You don't know what years they stole from me. I shot back. Now we take them back? Outside the room, footsteps passed. A man's voice laughed. Normal life. And inside the small hospital room, I realized I had just stepped into something far bigger than a broken marriage. I had stepped into a war, and it had started long before the day Thaddeus disappeared. It started the day someone decided my life was collateral. I squeezed his hand. Rest, I said again, but this time the word didn't mean comfort. It meant preparation. Because I'm going to get that box. He shook his head faintly. No? Yes? I said, voice steady. This time you are not alone. He tried to protest, but his body was too weak. And somewhere in the hallway, I saw a stranger pause by the door. Not a nurse. Not a doctor. A man in a jacket who looked too calm. Too still. His eyes flicked toward the room. Then away, my blood turned cold. They were already watching. And I understood with frightening clarity. This wasn't a coincidence. This reunion wasn't random. Life had placed Thaddeus back in front of me at the exact moment the truth was about to explode. And if I didn't act now, the past would bury us both. I left the hospital with my heart beating like it was trying to escape my ribs. The morning air outside felt colder than it should have, not because of weather, but because the world had changed while I was sitting next to Thaddeus's bed. It wasn't just my marriage that had been a lie. It was my entire downfall. For years, I believed the story everyone repeated. Thaddeus ran. He failed. He abandoned you. I wore that story like a scar, and I let it shape my life. But now I understood something terrifying. The scar had been carved by someone else's hand. Someone with power. Someone who didn't just break people. They erased them. I tightened my grip on my handbag and walked faster. My mind was racing with questions, but one thought stayed louder than the rest. The metal box. Thaddeus said it was buried under the old workshop. Evidence of everything. Evidence that could tear open an entire network. Evidence they would kill for. And the worst part, if they already knew he had surfaced, they would assume the truth could surface too. That meant time wasn't just running, it was bleeding out. The taxi ride across town felt like a slow descent into another world. We passed clean streets, bright stores, people carrying coffee and laughing, ordinary lives untouched by the kind of darkness I had just stepped into. I watched them with strange envy. They didn't know. They didn't know how close a normal life can come to being destroyed without warning. The taxi turned onto the south side. The buildings grew older. Rust crept across metal doors. Graffiti-stained walls. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust even through the window. "Here?" the driver asked, slowing down. I looked out. My throat tightened. It was the workshop, or what remained of it. Once, it had been full of noise. Machines, voices, radios playing in the background, men shouting measurements over each other. Now, it looked like a forgotten shell, a warehouse-like structure with a faded sign half hanging off the front. The windows were grimy. The door was locked with a chain. I paid the driver and stepped out. The sound of the taxi pulling away felt like my last connection to safety. I stood there for a moment, staring at the building like it might suddenly confess its secrets without me having to touch anything. It didn't. I walked around the side, my heels crunching on small bits of gravel. A cat darted behind a pile of broken pallets. The neighborhood felt too quiet. Quiet in the way predators prefer. I stopped and looked over my shoulder, nothing obvious. Just a distant couple walking. A man on a bicycle. A parked sedan half a block away. I told myself I was paranoid. But paranoia is what you call instinct when you don't want to admit you're in danger. I approached the back entrance. There was an old service door, the kind Thaddeus used to use when he worked late and didn't want to trigger the front alarm. The lock was rusted. I pulled. It didn't budge. My heart sank. Then I remembered what Thaddeus had said in the hospital, almost like a whisper meant to be forgotten. In the back behind the false shelf. I breathed in slowly. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed not out loud, not for miracles, just for enough luck to take one more step. I found a broken metal rod near the trash pile and jammed it into the old lock. I twisted. The metal groaned. My hands shook from effort and fear. With a sharp crack, the lock snapped. I flinched at the sound as if the building itself had screamed. I pushed the door open. A wave of stale air hit me. Dust, oil, residue, damp wood. The darkness inside swallowed me. I stepped in carefully. The door creaked behind me. I froze. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then I forced myself forward. The workshop was mostly empty. Shelves were bare. Tools were missing. Only traces of its former life remained. An old stool, a stain where a machine used to sit, a few bent nails on a table. I walked slowly, every footstep echoing. The sound made me feel exposed, like my presence was being announced. I reached the back area. A wall of shelves stood there. Some were real, heavy and bolted. But one looked slightly off, not as dusty, not as anchored. My pulse jumped. I reached out and pushed. It shifted. A false shelf. My stomach flipped. I moved boxes aside, pretending I wasn't trembling. Behind the shelf was a section of wall with a faint irregular line, like a panel had been covered, repainted and forgotten. I ran my fingers along it until I felt a slight gap. My breath caught. This was it. I knelt and began scraping at the floor. The concrete was older here, cracked, loose in places. Thaddeus had said it was buried, not hidden in a drawer, not stored in a safe. Buried, like a body. I used the metal rod as a lever and chipped away at the weak spot. My hands began to ache. Dust filled my nose. Sweat formed under my collar. Every few seconds I stopped, listening. Nothing. But then something faint, a sound outside, a car door. I froze completely. My heart hammered. I waited. Silence. I told myself it was nothing, but my palms were slick. I worked faster. The concrete gave way to dirt beneath. And then, my rod hit metal with a dull clang. I felt my blood turn to electricity. I dug with my hands now, clawing at the soil like an animal. The edges of a metal box appeared. I grabbed it and pulled. It was heavier than I expected, heavy in the way the truth is heavy. I stared at it, hands shaking. For a moment, I couldn't open it, because once I did there would be no going back. Then I heard it again. A sound outside, this time closer, the crunch of gravel. My entire body stiffened. I shut the box in the shopping bag I had brought and stood. Quietly, slowly, I tiptoed toward the side window. It was grimy but not completely opaque. I wiped a small patch with my sleeve and looked out. A black sedan was parked closer now. It hadn't been there before. A man stood near it pretending to check his phone. But his posture was wrong. Too still. Too alert. Like a guard, not a civilian. My mouth went dry. They were watching. I stepped back quickly. My mind raced. If I walked out the front door, they'd see me carrying something. If I stayed, they might come in. I looked around for another exit. There was a small side door half hidden behind stacked boards. I moved toward it, holding my breath. I pushed gently. It opened. I slipped out into an alley between buildings. The air hit my face like a slap. I walked fast, not running. Running draws attention. I walked fast like a woman late for an appointment. I turned the corner and merged into a busier street where people were moving, shopping, talking. Only then did I allow myself one quick glance behind. The black sedan was rolling slowly, following, not aggressively, not obviously, but following. My stomach twisted. I ducked into a convenience store. I pretended to browse snacks. I watched through the glass. The sedan passed slowly, then stopped half a block down. The man who had been by the car earlier stepped out and leaned against a lamppost, eyes scanning. He was waiting. They weren't sure what I had yet, but they suspected. I needed to lose them. My mind worked through options fast. Hospital, police. But police were compromised if what Thaddeus said was true. Hospital was predictable. Predictability gets you killed. I stepped out of the store and joined a crowd near a bus stop. When the bus arrived, I climbed on quickly and paid cash. I sat near the middle and stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to look out the window too much. At the next stop, I got off. Then I crossed the street and got on another bus. 2 stops later, I got off again and walked into a grocery market packed with people. Only when I felt the noise and warmth of the crowd around me did I finally breathe. I checked the street. No black sedan in sight. Maybe I had lost them, or maybe they had chosen to wait. Because when a predator knows you're carrying something valuable, it doesn't always chase. Sometimes it stalks. I returned to the hospital in the late afternoon. I kept the box hidden under a pile of clothes in the shopping bag. My heart was still racing, but my face was calm. Calm as camouflage. I walked through the hospital doors like I belonged there, like nothing was wrong. But every hallway felt different now. Every stranger seemed capable of being sent. When I reached Thaddeus's room, he was awake, his eyes locked onto mine instantly. Not with relief, with fear? "You went?" he whispered. I nodded. "I got it." His face tightened. "Did anyone see you?" "I think they followed me," I admitted quietly. A long silence. Thaddeus closed his eyes. Then he exhaled. "Then it started," he murmured. I placed the bag gently under his bed. "Now we open it," I said. Thaddeus's hand shook slightly. "Not yet," he whispered. "Not here." "Why not?" He looked at me with a hard seriousness. "Because hospitals have ears," he said. "And the people who did this don't need to enter a room to know what's inside it." My stomach turned. Then he added, "But you should know something." "What?" He swallowed, his throat moving painfully. "I didn't just hide documents," he whispered. "I hid proof that they used you too." My breath caught. Thaddeus nodded faintly. "They created debts in your name," he said. "They used your identity. They used your life as a washcloth to clean their money." My hands trembled. "So the foreclosure, the seizures." He nodded. "Not random," he said. "Designed." I felt bile rise. All those years of poverty, all the humiliation, not the result of a man abandoning me, the result of criminals making me collateral. I sat down hard in the chair. My mind reeled. "Then what do we do?" I whispered. Thaddeus looked at me as if he was choosing his words carefully, like each word could summon death. "We don't go to the police," he said. "Not yet." "Then who?" He hesitated. Then he said, "We need someone who lives for truth and fears nothing because he's already lost everything." I stared. "A journalist," I guessed. Thaddeus's eyes flickered. "Yes," he whispered, "but not just any journalist." He coughed weakly. "There's an old one," he said. "Retired. Disgraced. Too stubborn to die quietly. His name is..." He stopped. His eyes snapped to the door. My heart froze. Footsteps stopping outside, a shadow paused. Thaddeus's hand grabbed my wrist. "Don't move," he whispered. The door handle didn't turn. The shadow lingered, then moved on. I could barely breathe. Thaddeus's eyes were wide. "Do you see?" he whispered. "They don't even need to speak. They just remind us they're here." I swallowed hard. I leaned toward him and lowered my voice. "You said you obeyed," I whispered. "Obeyed who?" Thaddeus closed his eyes, pain twisting his face. "I can't say it here," he murmured. "Then say it somewhere else," I demanded. He looked at me, eyes wet. "You don't understand," he whispered. "The moment you hear the name, you become a target." "I already am," I said bitterly. Thaddeus's hand tightened. "There's one more thing," he whispered. "What?" He swallowed again. "The day I disappeared, they didn't just threaten you." My blood ran cold. "What else?" I asked. He looked at me with deep sorrow. "They made me believe you were already marked," he whispered. "That you weren't just leverage, you were the end goal." I felt my stomach drop. "End goal?" He nodded slowly. "They wanted you quiet," he said. "Permanent quiet. And they wanted me to be the one blamed for it." My vision blurred. An image flashed. Me dying in an accident. Headlines. "A husband's guilt. A clean cover." I felt my hands go numb. "So you erased yourself," I whispered. "Yes," Thaddeus replied. "Because if I stayed, you would have disappeared." A silence heavier than any sound filled the room. I looked down at the shopping bag hidden under the bed. The metal box inside felt like a bomb, because that's what truth is when it threatens powerful people. A bomb. And I had just carried it through the city in a plastic bag. Thaddeus squeezed my hand weakly. "You should leave," he whispered. "No," I said instantly. "You don't understand," he begged. "If they realize you have the box, they already do," I said coldly. He looked at me startled. My voice came out different, harder, steadier. "I lived in fear for years without knowing why," I said. "Now I know, and I'm done being frightened." Thaddeus stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then listen carefully," he whispered. He leaned toward me with what little strength he had. "The journalist's name is Gideon Hale," he said. "He used to expose public corruption. They destroyed his career. They tried to destroy him. He survived." I repeated the name in my head. "Gideon Hale." "Where do I find him?" I asked. Thaddeus closed his eyes. "There's a cafe near the old courthouse," he whispered. "He goes there every morning at 9. Same seat, same coffee, same newspaper." I nodded slowly. "And the box?" I asked. Thaddeus's lips tightened. "The box stays with you," he whispered. "Not in your house. Not in your car. Not where they can accidentally find it." I understood instantly. A safety deposit box. A backup. A war plan. My phone buzzed suddenly in my bag. I froze. It was a text. Unknown number, no name, no contact photo, just one line. "Leave the past buried, or you'll join it." My blood turned to ice. I showed the screen to Thaddeus. His face went gray. "They know," he whispered. I swallowed hard and turned my phone off. Then I leaned down and whispered back, low enough that even the walls couldn't steal my words. "Then they should have buried it deeper." Thaddeus stared at me, and for the first time since I found him at the dumpster, I saw something in his eyes besides fear. Hope. Not gentle hope. A dangerous kind. The kind that rises when a victim stops begging and starts hunting. Outside, the hospital hallway hummed with ordinary life. But inside that room, a different life had begun. Because now I had the box. Now I had the proof. Now I had the name of the man who could help expose it. And now the people who destroyed us had made their first move. Which meant the next move had to be mine. And I wasn't going to waste it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't close my eyes. Because I couldn't trust the dark. Every time the hospital hallway went quiet, my body tightened as if silence itself was a warning. Every footstep outside Thaddeus's room made my heart jump. Every pause near the door made my skin prickle. And the worst part was the message. "Leave the past buried, or you'll join it." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. It was confident. That was what terrified me most. Only powerful people threaten you like they already own the ending. I sat in the chair beside Thaddeus's bed, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of cold coffee that I never drank. Thaddeus slept in restless fragments, breathing shallowly, as if his body didn't fully believe it was allowed to rest. I kept the metal box hidden beneath his bed in a plain shopping bag, like an insult to the danger it carried. A plastic bag, a truth worth killing for. At 40:30 in the morning, I stood and walked quietly into the bathroom to splash water on my face. When I looked up in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes looked older than my age, not from wrinkles, from knowing. Knowing changes you, and once you know you can't go back to being harmless. I returned to Thaddeus's bed. He opened his eyes slightly. "You're still here," he whispered. "I'm still here," I answered. He blinked slowly. "Then listen," he murmured. "When you leave in the morning, don't go straight to the cafe." I frowned. "Why?" "Because they'll expect it," he said. "They already know you're moving." My stomach tightened. "How do you know?" Thaddeus closed his eyes and his voice became a thread. "Because they always assume the victim will run to someone," he whispered. "The police. A lawyer. A journalist." He looked at me again. "And they like to catch you at the doorway." I swallowed. He was right. If they were watching, they'd be watching for patterns. They'd be watching for a desperate woman doing desperate things. I leaned down. "Then what do I do?" Thaddeus's lips tightened. "You do what I did," he whispered. "You erase your pattern. At 7:00 a.m. I left the hospital, not alone. I asked a nurse I had quietly befriended over the years, an older woman named Clara, to walk me to the lobby as if we were chatting about normal things. Clara didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just looked at my face once and understood. "Trouble?" she whispered. "Something like that," I said. She squeezed my elbow gently. "Then don't be brave," she whispered back. "Be smart." We walked through the lobby. I kept my shoulders relaxed, my face calm, my eyes soft. Calm is a weapon. Outside, the morning air was crisp. I stepped down the front steps and immediately scanned the street. A row of cars, a few pedestrians, a delivery van, and then a black sedan parked across the road. It wasn't obvious. It didn't scream danger. It just sat there like it belonged, but something about it was wrong, too still. Too patient. Clara kept talking, pretending we were discussing breakfast recipes, but her voice became background noise. My entire body had shifted into alertness. Then the sedan's engine turned over softly, not loud, not sudden, just awake. My throat tightened. They were here. I forced myself not to react. I hugged Clara like a grateful friend and waved goodbye. Then I walked toward the bus stop instead of the taxi line. I did not look back. I boarded the first bus that came, even though it wasn't the one I needed. I sat in the middle, head slightly down. 2 stops later, I got off. I walked into a bakery, bought a small roll, walked out the other door, crossed the street, got on another bus. 3 stops, off, into a pharmacy, out again. I moved like water, never stopping, never making myself easy to track. Finally, I took a taxi from a crowded intersection. I gave the driver an address 2 streets away from the cafe, and when he dropped me off, I walked the last block on foot, slowly, calmly, like I had nothing to hide. The cafe was exactly where Thaddeus said it would be. Small, old, dim. The kind of place where history sat in corners and watched people come and go. I stepped inside, and the smell of coffee and old wood hit me. There were only a few customers, a couple arguing quietly, an older man reading a book. And then, near the window, in the same seat as if he had been carved into it, Gideon Hale. He looked nothing like the modern journalists on TV. No perfect suit, no flashy haircut, no confident grin. He was in his 70s, maybe older, with deep lines carved into his face. His hair was thin and white, his hands slightly trembling as he held a newspaper. There was a worn notebook on the table beside him, and his eyes were sharp. Too sharp for a man who had retired. Those were the eyes of someone who never stopped seeing too much. I walked toward him. He didn't look up until I reached the table. Then, slowly, he raised his gaze. His eyes scanned me. Not my clothes, not my face, my posture, my fear, my purpose. "Sit," he said simply. I sat. He didn't ask my name. He didn't smile. He just waited. I took a slow breath. "I need help," I said. He nodded once, like he already knew. "Everyone does," he said. "The question is, why should I risk my life for you?" His voice was calm. Not rude, just honest. I swallowed. "Because they already risked mine without asking," I said. His eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned back. "Who are they?" Opened my folder, not the box. "Not everything. Just enough." I slid 2 documents across the table. A contract, a transfer record, a signature that shouldn't exist, a money trail that screamed corruption. Gideon looked down. He read in silence. Then I watched the color drain from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His hand stopped moving. His eyes stayed locked on a name near the bottom of the page. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he whispered, almost to himself, This is dynamite. I watched him carefully. Is it real? He asked. I said, and I can prove it. He looked up sharply. Where did you get this? I hesitated. Then I told him the simplest truth. From a man who was forced to disappear to save me. Gideon stared at me. Something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy. Recognition. Like he had seen this pattern before. Tell me the story, he said, so I did. I told him about the dumpster. The hospital. Thaddeus's confession. The threats. The buried box. I did not say names that Thaddeus hadn't confirmed, but I did mention the shape of it. A network. A scam. A scapegoat. Collateral. A woman destroyed to keep criminals clean. When I finished, Gideon didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of coffee. Then he set the cup down with extreme care. Do you know what you're holding? He asked quietly. A chance, I said. No, he replied. You're holding a war. My mouth went dry. He tapped the documents. This, he said, touches people who don't lose. I leaned forward. Then we make them lose anyway, I said. Gideon's eyes stayed on me. You're older, he said. Why now? I didn't even need to think. Because I'm tired of being afraid, I said. Because he's dying. That last sentence cracked something in the air between us. Gideon inhaled slowly. Then he nodded once. All right, he said. Show me one more page. I hesitated, then I pulled out a third document. This one carried a name I recognized. A public name. A respected name. A name that had been on billboards, on charity event banners, on City Hall photos. Councilman Raymond Voss. Gideon's hand froze. He stared at it. Then he looked up at me sharply. You understand what this means? He said. I nodded. That name is a shield, he whispered, and behind him are the ones who never show their faces. He slid the paper back like it burned his fingertips. Then he leaned closer. Listen carefully, he said. If we do this, we do it right. Not loud, not fast, not emotional. I swallowed. How? He opened his old notebook and began writing without looking down. We create copies, he said. Encrypted, multiple. We place them in separate hands, separate jurisdictions. We set up a release plan, I repeated. Gideon looked up. If anything happens to you, he said calmly, these documents go public. My chest tightened. Like a dead man's switch, I whispered. He nodded. That's the only language predators respect, he said. Consequences. A waitress passed. Gideon stopped speaking immediately until she walked away. Then he lowered his voice. And there's one more thing, he said. What? He leaned in so close I could smell coffee on his breath. You were followed here, he whispered. My blood turned cold. What? He didn't glance out the window, he didn't move. He simply said, black sedan, 2 blocks away. The same man has walked past this cafe twice in the last 5 minutes. He pretends to check his phone, but he never types. My palms went sweaty. How do you know? Gideon's eyes were flat. Because I've survived people like that before, he said. They ruined me once. They don't get to do it twice. I forced myself to keep my face still. What do we do? Gideon smiled faintly. Not a warm smile. A dangerous one. We don't leave together, he said. And you don't go back to the hospital the same way you came. He scribbled a quick address on a torn piece of paper. Go here, he said, sliding it to me. A safe deposit bank. Small. Provincial. They don't ask questions if you pay cash. I stared. You want me to put the box there? He nodded. Today, he said, before they take it. I swallowed hard. And you. I'm going to do something they won't like, he said calmly. What? He leaned back in his chair. I'm going to wake up old friends, he said. Prosecutors who still have spines. Editors who still remember what courage is. My throat tightened. You have those. Gideon's eyes sharpened. I have enemies, he said. And sometimes enemies are useful because they love proving you wrong. He slid the notebook into his jacket. Now listen, he said. Your next 30 minutes matter. I nodded slowly. He stood. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't comfort me. He simply said the words that made my skin prickle. From now on, assume every room has ears. Then he walked out through the back door of the cafe. I stayed seated, breathing slowly. My heart hammered, but my face was calm. I forced myself to sip water like I was just another customer. Then, after 2 minutes, I stood and walked out the front door. I did not look around. I walked normally. I turned right, then left, then into a crowded street, then into a bus, then off again. Only after 20 minutes of moving did I allow myself a glance behind. I saw it, the black sedan. Far back, still following. My stomach twisted. But my mind was clear now. They weren't just watching. They were waiting for the right moment to take what I had. I reached the small provincial bank Gideon wrote down. It wasn't impressive. No marble, no grand security. Just a quiet building with old posters and tired workers. Perfect. I walked to the counter and asked for a safety deposit box. The clerk looked at me bored. How long? 1 year, I said. Paid in cash. Her eyes flicked up slightly. Cash always changes people's attention. She handed me paperwork. I signed with a steady hand. She gave me a key and led me to a small room with metal drawers. I opened the box. I placed the metal evidence box inside. Then I hesitated, because locking it away felt like locking away my only weapon. But Gideon was right. A weapon is useless if it gets stolen before you can fire it. I closed the safety deposit drawer, locked it, put the key in my pocket, and as I left the bank, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. A message. You just made this worse. My blood went cold. They knew. They knew I moved the evidence. They knew I met Gideon. They were close enough to smell my decisions. I turned off my phone completely. Then I went back to the hospital, but not directly. I took buses. I walked through crowds. I entered from a different entrance. When I reached Thaddeus's room, he was awake. His eyes scanned my face. You met him, he whispered. Yes, I replied. And? I sat down close and whispered. He confirmed the name. Thaddeus's face tightened. Which name? He asked. I swallowed. Raymond Voss, I whispered. Thaddeus closed his eyes. A deep pain crossed his face. Then it's worse than I thought. He murmured. I leaned in. Tell me, I whispered. Tell me why they wanted you dead. Thaddeus opened his eyes. And for the first time I saw something in them that wasn't just fear. It was guilt. He took a deep breath. Then, very quietly, he said, because I saw the thing that wasn't supposed to exist. My throat tightened. What thing? His voice dropped lower. A list, he whispered. A list of names, and what they did. I leaned closer. What did they do? Thaddeus swallowed hard, then said the words that made my blood freeze. They weren't only stealing money. He paused. They were making people disappear. My stomach dropped. Disappear. He nodded faintly. Accidents, he whispered. Suicides, fires, car crashes, men who questioned bids, women who saw signatures, accountants who kept copies. My hands went numb. And you saw the list? Thaddeus nodded again. That's why they ordered my death, he whispered. Because I wasn't just a scapegoat anymore. He stared at me. I was a witness. A heavy silence swallowed the room. I looked at him, barely breathing. And I was what? I whispered. Thaddeus's eyes filled. You were the leverage, he said. And later you were meant to be proof. I snapped. My mouth went dry. They would have killed me and blamed him. He nodded. That's why you had to hate me, he whispered. Because if you tried to find me, they would have finished what they started. I sat back slowly, trembling. Then I felt something rise inside me like fire. Not rage. Not panic. Resolve. Then we finish it, I whispered. Thaddeus stared. We? He asked weakly. I nodded. Yes, I said. Me. Outside the window, the world kept moving like nothing had changed. But inside that hospital room, the story had crossed its point of no return. Because now I knew the truth wasn't just corruption. It was violence. It was disappearance. It was murder disguised as paperwork. And now they knew I knew.